Okay, so for the starry background, what we're going to do is we're going to put a texture on a plane and we're going to animate the texture. So the rocket's not going to be flying through space. It's only going to be moving up and down. So I'm going to click this button right up here on the poly modeling tab, this little plane. And it's going to make a plane somewhere in space. I press W and find it. There it is. It's way down there. So I'm just going to bring it up to where my rocket is. And set it up. I'm just going to make it, actually, you know, I'm going to actually resize it with these inputs right here because I'm going to actually use the scale to actually transform and deform the texture. So don't size your plane with the scale tool. So I'm going to do 100 by 100 and both the width and the height right here. Okay, and just kind of get a frame. All right, that's fine. And you can see my rocket is casting a shadow on that plane. So I'm going to have the plane selected and I'm going to press Control A or Command A on the Mac. And I've got this P-plane shape right here, right? So there's P-plane, polyplane, and then P-plane shape 1. You want the P-plane shape 1 node. You want to go down to this Render Stats tab, open that up, and uncheck Receive Shadows and Cast Shadows. So now your rocket will not cast shadows onto the stars in the background. All right, so that's taken care of, but this doesn't look like stars yet, does it? Go to Windows, Rendering Editor, Hypershade. And if this part crashes your computer, as I know some of you are having some issues with Hypershade crashing your computer, feel free to skip it. All right. I would really encourage you to try it, but it's worth doing just to get an idea of all the things you can animate in Maya. Animation is not just about the 3D objects, it's also oftentimes about animating lights and animating textures, all sorts of things. There's really no end to the limits of things that can be animated inside of Maya. So I open it up and it throws every shader I've ever made in my face. All right, that's not very helpful. So over here in the Maya tab, I'm going to go down to a surface, and there's this thing called a surface shader right here. Seems they have them in Arnold too. He just has the AI standard. No, we're going to use the surface shader. The surface shader should render in Arnold just fine. So it's under Maya, Surface, and it's this little black ball right here, the surface shader. I'm going to select both of those things that just got created, and I'm going to press this right here, the graph up and downstream connections, and I've only got these guys to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and maximize this window while I'm working. And I need to put something into this out color right here. So I'm going to go over here to under the Maya category, and I'm going to grab a 2D texture of a noise. And this blobby thing here, we can actually edit that to look like stars. So let's see, the first thing I want to do is let's play with this ratio here. Okay, no. Amplitude, no, we want some amplitude. Frequency is basically, oh, that's the time frequency. Frequency ratio, increase that, decrease the ratio. Size randomness, nope, if I enter a value higher than 1, it's 1. Randomness, lots of randomness. Implode does that, makes it like you could do a warp effect, right? Kind of like that old Star Wars warp speed. You could probably convince the noise texture to do that for you. How much ratio? Okay, so I want a lot less of these big dots. And put the out color into the surface shader here. So this noise type billow, the density, if I bring that down, I was looking right at it, that will give me smaller stars, so to say. All right, I'm gonna shrink that window down, and I'm going to middle mouse drag this surface shader onto this plane here, and go to shading, hardware texturing. All right, there we go. We've got some stars on there. I'm going to rename my p-plane to StarryBackground, and my surface shader 1 to star shader. All right. So now if I hit play, nothing happens. All right. The other thing is these stars are all perfectly round, right? We want to stretch them, giving the impression that we're moving through space. So I'm just going to scale out like that. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change their color a little bit. So let's select this noise one. I'm going to call this star noise. Go down here to color balance, and on color gain, I'm going to add some yellow into it, and I'm also going to drag this in to be a little bit darker. And that should be updating. I don't really see any updates happening, but it should be doing that. It just decided to not work. Okay. It's not just the Mac that's having problems with Hypershade. All right. So now that they're stretched, we want to animate the UVs. And you probably did a little bit of opening the UV editor in that solar system video. I'm going to go ahead and show you a little bit more under Windows, Modeling Editors, UV Editor. Okay. So this UV editor, this is like a separate space, right? This is a two-dimensional space for working with images on 3D textures. All of this whole white grid here, these are UVs that correspond to a vertex, right? So let's see, I've got my soft select on. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off with the B hotkey, right? So if I select this little piece right down here all the way in the corner, it shows you where that corresponds to in 3D space. So a UV map is basically, it's a map of how to get a piece on the texture to correspond to a piece on the 3D model. You can think about it like if you were to perfectly GIF wrap a 3D model so that there was no excess wrapping paper and it followed the seams of the model perfectly, or the curvature of the 3D model perfectly. That's kind of what a UV map is. You just kind of envision the texture wrapping around the model. And all these primitives up here that you make in Maya, they have UVs by default, right? So there's square, that was a cylinder, and you don't have to make these, by the way, I'm just kind of showing you. There's a sphere, right? So it doesn't look anything like a sphere in UV space, but it does, it maps to a sphere. So our star background, even though it's stretched out, it still translates to this right here. But when we stretch it out, it has the effect of elongating these little dots. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to animate these UV coordinates to move in the negative U direction. So this is U, this is V, right? Horizontal is U, vertical is V. So what we're going to basically do is I'm going to just press W, get the move tool, select all the UVs. We're going to do, select all the UVs. We're going to do this kind of thing, right? So I'm not actually going to sit here and try and keyframe. I don't think you can actually keyframe UVs in this editor here, right? But this is what we want, right? If we get up close, right, that would look like our rocket's flying, right? Especially with it bobbing up and down. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and just undo that till it gets back there. So that's what we're gonna be doing. So I'm gonna select this Place 2D Texture node, which this basically tells the shader to use UVs in putting texture on the model. There's other methods of placing textures like projections, but we're not going to get into that. So we want the translate frame right here, right? So that's what I just showed you in the UV editor of moving the UVs. I'm going to say we're going to start at frame 1, so I've moved myself all the way back to frame 1. I'm going to right click, set key. I'm going to go to the last frame and I'm going to type -10 and then right click this field and set key. All right, now let's scroll the timeline, go all the way back, and there we are. All right, I hit play. And it looks like we got stars. All right, so there's one slight problem here, and it is slight. Right, okay, so like right now, it looks like we're going like super fast, right? And in the animation editor, I'm gonna go ahead and minimize hypershade so I've got more screen real estate. In the hypershade, I've got that Place 2D Texture selected, and here's the Translate Frame U attribute. And you can see that I've got a keyframe at the beginning and a keyframe at the end of the animation. So I'm animating the texture placement, and I have I can set keyframes in other parts of the animation, and I can edit the tangents, of course, right? I can also drag the keyframes and move them up. So like if I doing this, I'm going to really make the spaceship look like he's going quite a bit slower. Still it's going fast. Still going fast. Oh, but check that out. Did you see that? It's like he's coming to a stop. I mean, that's kind of neat, right? You can totally play with that. Like if you wanted to animate him coming to a stop, I'm gonna really push that. I'm gonna break tangent, wait tangent, and just stretch that way out. Right? I mean, I'd have to change the animation to make that work. And probably also animate the scale, right? So I'll show you real quick like how you can use that to work together with things, right? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and scale X, key selected, go to the end of the animation, and set the scale X to 1. I want to pull it closer so that you can't see the edges of my plane, and key selected. Okay, so pull back hypershade up again, control select the place 2D texture, and then control select the star background so I can take a look at my scale X there, and yeah, so that happens way too fast. Let's make it occur with a little more ease. And being able to see the grid come in like that really ruins the illusion, but all right, that doesn't quite work out very well. What you'd want to do is you'd want to actually set the pivot of this object to something like something close to the ship, right? So that actually it is really close to the ship. You'd have to pick a different pivot point though, so it looks like it's probably stopping from over here. Anyway, that's a major off tangent here, so I'm just gonna delete that and go back to the place 2D texture here. And this is it slows down real fast, right? So we don't want any slowdown. So I'm going to select these two keyframes, and then I'm going to click this little button here, which is linear interpolation, and it's just a straight line with no ease in or ease out or anything. So now it just kind of moves constantly. It will jump at the end with a little bit of loop, but there it is. Actually, that's not too bad. That loops pretty nicely. Looks better than the one in my intro. Just because I've got a lot fewer stars. That's nice. But yeah, this kind of stuff where you've just got an object moving up and down and then a scrolling background. These kind of tricks are used all the time in CG. Don't be afraid to use them. Don't think that anybody actually builds out more than they have to pull off a shot. It's crazy to do that. All right. I look forward to seeing what you guys do with this assignment.